the best learning experiences are the real scars that failure leaves. The actual experience of losing something, failing, egg on your face, the feeling of the yolk dripping down of failure.
Welcome to the real F word. I'm so happy to be here with you, Levi. We've become fast friends, and I remember many years ago, a good mutual friend of ours said, hey, you've got to meet Levi Lindsay.
Yeah.
He's so talented, and he's starting this company called VidArmy, and we're going to talk a little bit more about VidArmy.
It was Michael Jordan, I think, was our mutual friend that told you that you needed to meet me.
Indeed. MJ, number 23.
Who was the friend?
Mark Matheson.
Oh, that's right.
And
yes.
he'll probably be listening to this episode.
Oh my gosh, Mark, it's been too long. I'd love to chat. He was a mentor for us at VidArmy.
That's right. And you've had a really interesting and varied career. You've been a CMO. You've run content at one of the larger kind of consumer brands here, Kizik, that grew really, really fast. You're now the VP of marketing at Hona, which is a software company. I think you cater to attorneys, right? So you've had a terrific run. And today I want to talk about all the failures and none of the successes, right? That is the
You got it.
theme of our discussion here on the F Word podcast. So tell me about VidArmy. What was the genesis of the idea? And talk a little bit about that early growth when things were going well. And then there was like, you and I, you shared this experience with me. There's a little bit of a turn. And I think there's a lot of learning from your experience there that the listeners will want to hear.
Yeah, VidArmy it's so funny. We had lunch a while ago, and I told you this whole story, and I was like, I really need to learn how to condense this, but it really was so many failures and learning in that 3 years. I feel like I went and got a couple master's degrees. If you're familiar with the LDS culture here in Utah, I was living in my parents' basement with my newlywed wife. We just graduated from college, and we're kind of trying to figure out what to do next after college. And I was assigned to home teach at the time is what it was called, a gentleman in my parents' congregation up in Bountiful, Utah. And we became very fast friends. And he said, hey, I have this idea, but I'm working full time and I have bills to pay, but you're this young kid who's living in his mom's basement, so you probably have the financial flexibility and time to start this up. And I was like, I do. And so he's like, it's a video subscription. It's $500 a month and you get unlimited video production for $500 a month. And I was like, I like the sound of this.
Did you have a video background?
No video background, no photography, nothing at all.
Marketing background? Or,
I wanted to go into marketing, but I saw that the marketing degrees all had a couple more math classes, and I didn't want to take any more math. So I did the professional sales degree at Weber, thinking maybe I can like somehow default into marketing. Thankfully I did, but it was a dumb choice. But yeah, then it was like, okay, you got access to my camera equipment. I'll start throwing some business your way. Minky Couture, I think, was already a client at the time, cool. And a couple other like smaller businesses up in northern Utah were clients, and started getting some working capital, hired our first employee after a couple months. And the first year was me working full-time in the business, not paying myself, with one employee that we paid, I think $18 an hour, and Johnny being full-time. And that was kind of year one. And we just cranked, trying to build recurring revenue. Sorry.
What was the response in the market? Like, were you signing up a bunch of clients quickly?
I think that's a good question. I think it was a little bit of because I was always positioning it as unlimited filming for $500 and for $500, and there was a lot of learning of how to tweak the model. We actually got it to the point where it would economically work, but within that first year, we really were like eating.
Yeah, it was a nonprofit.
It was a nonprofit for sure, and we also we were very delusional about how service companies grow. Mm-hmm. We thought that it would grow like a tech company and our multiples would be 20x and VC dollars would flow in. And we thought that it would be like a 1 to 10 ratio on every dollar. But it's in service, it scales long and slow. It's like The way I look at it is you get fast initial revenue when you start a service company, but then things taper off more on the tail end. It's not a hockey stick. It's almost like a quick growth and then flatline and then like slow, steady growth. And I didn't realize that.
So how many years did you build VidArmy?
3 years.
Okay. About how far into this kind of entrepreneurial journey did you see signs of kind of weakness in the model or the partnership?
Things started getting crazy as they scaled. So year one, at the end of year one, that's when my partner said, okay, it looks like we have enough monthly recurring revenue that I could come in and you can, we can pay my salary and I can quit this job I'm doing. And so he jumped in, we started paying him a salary. I think I started paying myself maybe $1,200 a month at that time.
Wow.
Cause it's just like, I'm going to grind it out. It was 50-50 from the start, no partnership agreement. And we're just cruising, having a good time. And we just believe in this thing. And it's a lot of hard work, but we see the long-term vision. And then he came on and he's like, I can handle 100 clients. Don't worry. Week one, he was like, hey, we need to hire some help for me. And so then now we're hiring an editor for 40, 50 grand a year, whatever that is on top of his salary. So all the
because your partner had a video background.
Because my partner did have a video background. And so the idea was that he would be the individual contributor to come in and also be the entrepreneur. But it quickly just turned into, no, I need some individual contributor help. And then at this time, this is one of the funniest parts to me, is his brother-in-law started a pest control business a few years back and was just on the tail end of selling it. And I think he'd built it up to like $1 million in annual revenue. And my partner and I were like, just starry-eyed. Like, I can't believe you scaled a business to $1 million in annual revenue. Like, this guy is the king of business.
You've spent $1 million in a single ad channel in your career per month.
Oh yeah. Money loses all perspective in marketing.
Yeah, that's right.
I think we talked about this, but it's like you're like, let's just run this quick test. Oh, didn't work. Well, that was a house.
Exactly.
Anyway, so we said, come on board. Still no partnership agreement. Come on board. We'll give you 33% of the business, and it'll be 33, 33, 33. So it's me, my original partner, and his brother-in-law, and now we're all three owners. And that's really, because we didn't have working capital or funding, I mean, just free labor for equity is kind of how we got going. And like my partner's initial equipment and jolt of clients that kind of got us the ball rolling. But then we needed to start bringing in more business, to start scaling, to start hiring more employees. And so I would classify year two more as like figuring out how to make the model work and how to grow. And I think by the end of year two, we had around 15 employees. And I still wasn't taking a salary. And his brother-in-law, my original partner's brother-in-law, wasn't taking a salary still. But we could see the progress. We could see the monthly recurring revenue climbing, and it was this legit sustainable business. We had an office. We'd bought in some more equipment. And that's kind of where year two ended. And then we also kind of started to see that the model was more, the $500 production was more of our Costco chicken. Just to kind of, it was more of like an advertising ploy to get people to come in to film other videos.
Because you had to charge more, right? It's $500 doesn't get you a lot of video.
Not a sustainable model. Nope. We would limit it. It was like we'd film for 1 hour. But like by the time we were in year two, it was like we had a little studio. We'd film for 1 hour, film as many videos as you wanted. Mostly they were talking head. And it was, we would chop that up into as many videos as you feasibly could and do it all just in the studio. So it was like no travel, tight on editing. And so it actually ended up working, but we kind of had to narrow the scope so that it could scale.
So you at the end of year two, you got another partner. So the three of you, did you finally pencil that, or did you finalize an agreement? Do you never had like a finalized partnership agreement? By the way, this happens a lot. There's probably some learning here for entrepreneurs. These handshake agreements on day one seem to be great. There's high trust and there's excitement to build a business. Invariably, things don't always go as planned, and it's a mess.
Yeah.
Is that fair to say?
Especially when your friends or your family or even in Utah, church members, they would never do that to me. Someone who's in my congregation, someone who's my family member, someone who acts so kindly and we get along so well, we would never end up disagreeing to the point where we couldn't fix it.
Yeah, those are famous last words, right? I've seen that play out over and over and over again.
Yeah.
I think especially in certain cultures, this culture of trust is a positive thing. We want to give people the benefit of the doubt and trust each other, but it's business. You just need to remember this is business. And in the end, what's written is what people are going to do. Yeah.
And the learning for me was you can trust anybody on this planet once an ironclad agreement's in place. Mm-hmm. Then you can trust completely and fully, but you do the diligence and then you trust. You don't trust and then do the diligence because it's always too late.
So you're 2 years in.
2 years in.
And then a few things are changing in the business. And like, talk to me about this year 3.
Oh man, year 3 is where things get real wild. COVID hits, which obviously is crazy for a film company.
Yeah.
Because sending people out gets sketchy. But what's interesting is the government was handing out money like candy. Mm-hmm. So our cute little video business got a nice, juicy check with a
ERC,
sweetheart loan. The EIDL.
Yeah.
So we get the EIDL loan, which is like it's like a 30-year fix. You owe $500 a month, like after 3 years. Yeah. And it's 1% interest. Like it's the most sweetheart loan a business could ever get. So that money hits our bank. And we're so many things that because
this is the first infusion of capital you've had, right? You've been bootstrapping this. So like every dollar that comes in is paying people and trying to keep the business alive. Mm-hmm. And now you get this little influx, little shot in the arm, right?
Yep.
What do you do with this money?
First thing we do, we hire a CEO to come. So now we have 3 founders and a CEO and our 15 employees. So we're just over leveraged. Our monthly expenses are just climbing, but we're just our optimism isn't rooted in logic at all. We just we see this amount of money, and like we did with the $1 million business, we thought this is a ton of money, but
burn it fast.
It burns fast. You'd be shocked how fast money burns, like at whatever quantity into a business. Right. But we all, and then we kind of all started disagreeing pretty quickly on how these funds should be divvied out. I always saw it as like, this is working capital for us to grow. Maybe we put some into advertising. Maybe we pay ourselves a little bit of a salary and give ourselves jobs, like really get strict on what our job in the business is. Mm-hmm. But anyway, we hired a CEO, Nick Staggy. Guy's a stud. That was probably the one correct thing we did with those funds, because he took us from mid 5 figures to well beyond 6 figures a month in revenue, and a good chunk of that being recurring monthly recurring revenue within the first few months. So that was probably the deal of our lifetime that we were going to get with that small amount of cash, was hiring Nick Staggy as our CEO. But at the same time, I didn't understand some financial obligations that the original partner was going through at the time. And he came to us and said to our new CEO, to myself and his brother-in-law, and said, I need to get my salary back up to this immediately. Sorry, reversing. All the founders took our salaries away during COVID to make sure we could.
Right. So you're working for free again.
Yeah.
Trying to make ends meet. How did you make ends meet during those days?
My sweet wife. She worked. That was one thing that killed me. I remember. Sorry, this is a side tangent, but I remember dropping off my little girl, my first daughter, to daycare while my wife was at work working full time to make sure I didn't have to take a salary. And I dropped off my little girl and she's bawling her eyes out and clawing to not go and just clawing my arm as she leaves. And I go get in the car and I just started bawling because I've now got a partner that's saying he's got to get paid and we don't have the money to pay him, but I think he has the perception that he can get paid because we have this little nest egg. And I have to go drop my daughter off to go work for free at this business, and it's year 3, and I've been grinding hard. I just lost it. And I think that's where emotions started to come into play, and I started to fight back and say, no, you can't go stay at home, buy a new house without telling us, and give us a vague description of what you're going to be doing when you're working from home and get a salary when none of us are, when the rest of the founding group aren't taking a salary. Then his brother-in-law gets deployed to California for the military during COVID.
Oh, wow.
So
now
I'm on my own. Thankfully, his brother-in-law was always very level-headed, the mature one of the 3, and kind of played mediator between me and the original founder. But so now we're fighting with the founder. Brother-in-law's in California. I have to keep things going. We got 15 employees. We're closing Amazon. So cool things are happening on the revenue side, on the client side.
This is such a classic story because there were a lot of positive things. And maybe from the outside looking in, it was all up and to the right. But so much turmoil behind the curtain, right? So much turmoil in the partnership.
Yeah. Oh, and it's funny because we grew very organically by just personal brand on LinkedIn all the time. Just pushing our personal brands on LinkedIn is really how it was our main acquisition channel.
And by the way, you've been a master of LinkedIn ever since. I mean, you're very active and get lots of great engagement.
Yeah. So well, I appreciate that. I think out of necessity, I was able to find a voice on there. And it's been a huge blessing. I wouldn't have recovered after the failure if it wasn't for that. But anyway, we were really good at making things look really rosy to LinkedIn while things were just completely caving in on us. But so now at this point, we're kind of just stewing in this argument of hey man, we're not going to pay you a salary. We just can't do it. And then all of a sudden we get in the mail a thick partnership agreement. And the partnership agreement says that this partner is going to get 6% of the top line revenue from the business for the lifetime of the business. And
is this something you guys had talked about?
No, it was
out of the blue. From a law firm. Completely
out of the blue from a lawyer he had hired. We get this partnership agreement slapped on our desk, asking for just no strings attached. Every $1 he gets 6 cents, no question, and it's gross revenue, not net, not profits, gross revenue.
Which in a service business, which you were probably running a gross margin of 40%.
I wish.
Yeah.
I think it was 20% at its best.
A net or gross?
20% margins at its best.
20% net. That's what I was going to say. Net. So by the time you have overhead after you've paid your people and your cost of delivery, you're probably 20% net margin. So 6% ends up being a big chunk of that.
Yeah. Well, and in hindsight, you read Shoe Dog from Phil Knight and you're book. You understand a growing business with limited capital eats itself alive. I love the quote, you can die from indigestion just as easily as you can die from starvation.
Starvation, yeah.
And the irony, like you were saying, is things were up and to the right revenue-wise, but then we're eating ourselves alive through arguments and partnership agreements, disagreements, and what to do with capital. And maybe we could have made it outside of that, but even then it would have been a miracle. And so just things were tight.
Yeah. So you get this partnership agreement, and how do you respond?
Like I said, I think things had gotten really emotional at this point because I'd been working for 3 years. I think at this time I'd made an accumulation of maybe $30,000 over the 3 years.
Wow.
Maybe. Because like I would get a nice livable wage for a month and then we'd take it away pretty immediately. I'd get it and then we'd take it away because I was always like, look, I'll take my salary
Take
away
one for the team, right? You were playing the long game.
Yeah. So
by the way,
emotions were high.
this is interesting. The work for free mentality. I was taught early in my career that's what's required is a little bit of work for free. And there's times in your life where you can afford to do that. And you were kind of in the moment. Like today, you couldn't work for free. You got 2 daughters and right. And you have a mortgage probably and a couple of cars. And so like, but early in your career, you have this like window where you can probably give it 2 or 3 years without making a lot of money. And I always wonder, like, is that worth it? And it's the answer is it can be, but it rarely is.
Yeah.
Right? Because it rarely works out and pays you back because most startups fail.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you shouldn't do that for the experience and to get started as an entrepreneur. But I worked for free for a time as well.
Yeah.
So.
It's hard because I couldn't do it again. However, thankfully it happened at the right time so that I don't think I actually would be providing for my family in the way that I am now if I wouldn't have worked for free.
Yep.
'Cause I got on LinkedIn, I built that following, and I learned the hard lessons. I learned what working capital was. I learned the corporate structure.
Yeah.
I kind of almost see it as like, I went and said, I don't want to do a master's degree. And God was like, I'll make you do one anyway.
Yeah. It's so true. I mean, the experience, you learn more running a business in a month than you would in a year sitting in a classroom.
100%.
Period.
Reading a line about something versus the feeling of like, ooh, I've over leveraged my monthly expenses is such a...
Yeah, fixed costs will kill a business.
Yeah. Having your stomach sink to the ground because of a number versus someone just telling you, oh, this happens in business is 2 completely different things.
Not being able to make a payroll is a great lesson in accounting.
Yeah. And I don't know, it's kind of random, but I think I've been a better executive within companies because I can empathize more with the founders.
Sure.
Whereas a lot of people have this perception of the founders of like, you lucky dogs, you got all this equity and you have these payouts and da-da-da-da-da. And it's like, they leverage some risk.
I see this dynamic as I work with founders where the rest of the employees have this perception. These founders are building, like one in particular, built a business over 11 years, right? Started in their home, right? And grew it. Mm-hmm. And it's successful now, right? And certainly there's some free cash flow now. Yeah. But no one recognizes the sacrifices for years and the financial risk, right? They put everything on the line to get to where they're at. Yeah. And employees will show up without that perspective and they just can't relate.
Yeah. And everyone loves to say, look at us now, look how big we are. And I work for such and such. It's like, you have no idea what year 1 is like. The year 1 to year 2, year 3, those are different animals. Like, I know I don't have it in me anymore. Like, the reason I love Hona is I'm coming in right after Series A. I'm coming in 3 years when there's market validation.
Some working capital. You can
there's
make some marketing investments. You've got a team.
100%.
It's a lot different when you have capital and people.
I would have to be super passionate about something if I was to go and do a year 1 to 2 again.
All right, I'll invite you. Let's start something.
Goodness gracious. Or I know
I work for a consulting firm now.
Maybe after an exit we can.
Yeah,
what's that true. Joke is like, I wish I had enough money that my wife could have a coffee shop that loses $40,000 a month.
That's right.
Anyway, year 1 is a beast.
So you're in year 3, you get the partnership agreement and you're like, this doesn't work.
Yeah. I'm like, the math isn't mathing. I get emotional. One of my really big lessons in this is when things like this happen, that you don't take it personally. Yeah. That you come back without emotion and you just say, hey, this doesn't work. And even if they come back emotionally, you just can't.
Were you emotional at the time?
Very emotional, very immature. I think I was 27 at the time. Couple years out of college at this point. And
maybe a little overconfident.
Super overconfident. And just very I handled it very personally and emotionally. And I wish I would have had a more level head about it. I think also at the time I thought, well, this is my one shot. Like there's nothing after this.
Yeah.
VidArmy is me.
Is your identity.
There's my identity in the community. I was Levi, one of the founders of VidArmy. And so I just thought like, this guy's going to end my life. Thankfully, gosh, it was just a silly little video company. But so yeah, we get those papers. We say no. He comes back and then negotiations start, and the negotiations are the different planets we were living on were incredible.
In terms of the value that he is ascribing to the business versus where you guys were at.
Yeah. I mean, one offer was you pay me $200,000 every year for the rest of the life of the business.
Yeah. And
it just, where's that money coming from?
All of the profit, right?
Like we're not making an extra $200,000 right now.
Yeah.
I don't know what business is that they could just be like, oh, okay, just to get this argument over with, we'll hand over $200,000 a year forever.
So it became super contentious, and you're going back and forth via email?
Yeah, email, phone call.
Was there a moment that you realized that this was not reconcilable? Like that you weren't going to be able to actually find like a meeting of the minds and a solution here?
I don't know when it was, but at some point in the crux of it all, it might have been right after we did mediation. So we finally met in person with a mediator, with our lawyers. We hired a lawyer, and he said, he's like, my final offer is for 3% of my equity, of my 33%, I want $1 million. And I was just like, dude, here's the numbers. We put it all together. The business is not only worth zero, it owes money. So here's our offer. Like, we'll give you X amount of money, which is, I don't even know how we'll come up with that, but you got to walk away. Like, we want all of that 33%. And I think this is where I learned about reality distortion fields and how there are people, and they're scary in business because there's no reasoning. And so now we're in this position of like, this guy's not backing down. And he has just as much as attachment to this business emotionally as we do.
There is still no documentation that has established the equity in the business.
Nope.
Who was on the original LLC documents? Who was the managing member?
I think me and him.
Okay.
And, we went down all those rabbit holes. But I think there was enough like documentation through text messages and emails.
So even though there was an agreement, everyone had pretty much said, hey, everyone owns a third of this business.
Yeah.
So that's
fair. And
so
thankfully things were strong enough there that there wasn't really arguing out of that. Anyway, the next move was, after fighting for a few more months, we bought him down to 19% from 33%. For an unreasonable amount of money that we were going to pay in a few large chunks over a few months.
You guys could have majority control of the business?
Yeah.
So there wasn't this kind of like stalemate?
And I mean, I learned a lot about stuff. Like if you're 20% or more, you have to be on loans and on certain types of documents and leases. And so our goal was to at least get him to 19%. So we got him down to that.
It sounds like you had some debt too. So you'd raised some notes?
Well, the EIDL is technically debt.
That's right.
And then like the PPP loan, but thankfully that was forgivable. But it was like we were so over leveraged on our monthly expenses. It was like, we need all this working capital. And like you look at it on a balance sheet and the company was literally worth $0 at the moment.
Yeah. But you're still growing. You're still providing good service.
Yep. And at this time we're up well above the 7-figure mark.
Yeah.
Or I guess we're around that 7-figure mark in annual revenue. And like I said, there's some good monthly recurring. So once we get him down to 19%, he went and started a company called VidFam to compete with VidArmy directly with a new partner. He told people, ask me why it's called VidFam. I assume what he would tell people is that, and maybe I caught wind of this, but it was called VidFam because he valued family and we didn't, because we wouldn't let him be with his family. I think, in his head, from his perspective, it's, you guys, like, I'm here as a friend asking you for a favor, and you're not giving it to me when I would do the same for you.
And I'm sure if he was on the podcast, he'd have a perspective about things
For
as
sure.
always. But man, how rough. Like at that time, like what was your mental health like?
So this is when panic attacks started. I think this was all around like November of 2020. And that's when I had my first panic attack. It was in the crux of arguing over like, how are we going to even get him to 19%?
Yeah.
And that's when I found myself in my closet. I'd never had a panic attack before. I'd, heard of them before, but I'm just in my closet and just breathing heavily, can't breathe. And like my mind is disassociating. It feels existential. And my wife comes in and catches me, and I'm just in this shock state. And she just starts kind of rubbing my back. And that was freaky. Because at the moment I didn't have the mental fortitude or knowledge that anything would get better. And then the tricky part is I'm also experiencing burnout because I've been working my freaking butt off for 3 years.
How many hours a week were you working?
I mean, at the crux of it, sometimes 80.
Yeah.
When you're a business owner, it's like, I remember I would go on vacation with my family, and I'd be on the beach shore texting, and they'd be out in the water.
Unfortunately, I do know.
On a vacation we couldn't afford. I'm over there working, trying to figure out
credit cards.
Trying to figure out, well, this videographer was supposed to be here at this time, and because your business just never leaves your brain.
No,
it's like even if you have a thought, it's your second thought, and then you can maybe get another thought where you taste some food and you're like, oh, this food's good, my business. This food's good, my business.
Yeah, it's consuming mentally, right? It's like even physically, my wife would always say, hey, you're here physically, but you're not here mentally. Like I was there, but she knew, and everyone could tell that I wasn't engaged. I wasn't connecting. I wasn't even talking because my mind was spinning about all the things that had to be done and fixed and all the problems and challenges. And that's such a dangerous place to find yourself in.
Yeah. Because
you're not only sacrificing your time, and in your case, you weren't getting paid, but you're sacrificing relationships. You're sacrificing real connection for the pursuit of some success, some achievement. And that's a dangerous place to be. And a lot of entrepreneurs can relate to that.
Yeah.
So the panic attack started. And by the way, thank you for being so open about this, because we haven't talked about this a lot in previous episodes. But I had experiences during about a 1.5-year stretch, very similar to that, where not in a chemical way was I depressed, but all of the signs, I dealt with all the kind of signs of depression. And I remember being curled up a time or two in a closet or in a car, just because I didn't feel like I did not have a coping mechanism. And I had internalized everything that was happening in the business in a way that I felt like I had to solve it all, and that I carried it all on my shoulders in a way that was so unhealthy. And so did that get better? Was it pretty persistent, the panic attacks and the anxiety that came with this stressful situation at VidArmy?
It got worse and worse. Because I think you couple it with a few things. I have ADHD and I get hyperfocus, where hyperfocus is a blessing because you go hard at one thing and you get obsessed with that thing. And my thing was make VidArmy the biggest thing this world has ever seen.
This was your bet.
Yep.
You were swinging for the fences.
And that leads to burnout. And then it leads to panic attacks because I'm working on this thing and people are fighting against me. And so the frustration ensues, the burnout ensues. And what's interesting is, and you probably experienced this, is it's like sometimes as the founder or business owner, you start feeling all those pressures and those weights and the depression and the burnout. But then you don't feel like you even have the space to go recover because everyone's depending on you and the problems aren't going to go away. It's not like a lot of employees have the privilege of punching out at 5 and being like, if I lose my job, I'll go get another one. But for you, it's like, no, I've leveraged everything into this. I've bled into this, and I have to make it work. and these people are making salaries and I have to show up the next day.
Isn't it interesting? As a leader, we feel this responsibility, and it is our responsibility to show up and rally the team and to motivate and to provide vision and encouragement. And I remember walking up the stairs to my office every single morning. It was an old building in Denver, and these metal stairs, I can still feel the weight of every step because I was in so much pain. And I knew that there was an outcome, an inevitable outcome here that was not going to be positive for many people, including those employees and my investors and my customers. And so I would walk up those stairs and I walk in, and I think if you ask people how I showed up every single day, they would say I was positive and motivating and encouraging, and I had to dig so deep, but I was hiding. I was hiding real pain. And just because I felt like I had no other choice. I couldn't show up in that state of anxiety or stress because it would just bleed into the rest of the organization. Yeah. And that I think exasperates the problem because there's no outlet. Yeah. Right? You feel like you have to show up in a way that is so dissonant with how you're feeling. Did you feel that way?
Yeah. Yeah. And you're almost like running on reserve. You're running on adrenaline because you've already given everything that you can give. Yeah. So now you're just tapping into fight or flight chemicals.
That's right. That's probably true.
to make people happy. And it's like, you're not taking from a tank that you've filled anymore. Yeah. You're taking from an empty tank, and it's this extra little caveman pouch of adrenaline that you're running on. And that's dangerous because it got to the point, and I'll fast forward a little bit, when I finally did leave the business, and I could kind of like take myself out of it. I was so used to being Levi, the founder of one of the founders of VidArmy, and so hyper focused on it, and being on autopilot with my family, and just grinding through burnout. And then you take all that away, and it was like, wait, now what's my purpose? And what's next, and who am I? And my identity was tied to that. My my happiness was tied to the outcome of that, and I didn't get the outcome of that. So now I'm sad. It all came to a pretty big crux where I attempted suicide about a month and a half later, where I just thought, like, because I'd emptied the tank so dry that I was like, how am I supposed to go on when there's just an empty tank? And I'm reaching for stuff and I am not finding anything. Thankfully, time is what fills that tank. Not thankfully is it takes a long time. I think, Alex MacArthur and Kizik probably saved my life by reaching out and taking a chance on me. Otherwise, who knows where I'd be or what I'd be floundering through, but they gave me a purpose and an awesome team to fall back on and trusted me with projects that I fumbled through. And I don't think I'd be here without that.
This experience is probably all too familiar to so many entrepreneurs. We don't really talk about the mental health costs that come with business ownership, with starting something. And I just wonder, like, could you have done anything different along the way that would have kind of helped you cope? We're so grateful that you're here and have had this successful marketing career post VidArmy. But most importantly, we're so thankful that you're here sharing this perspective and being vulnerable and giving hope and direction to other entrepreneurs. But what would you have done different along the way that would have prevented that spiral?
Oh, man. It's so funny because I've bounced to a few companies now, and I look back. I don't do this perfectly anymore or now, but I do it sometimes when I get into the crux of the problems of the current day of the current company. I think, oh yeah, I was facing some problems at Neighbor. Mm-hmm. I don't even remember what they were, but man, I was stressed out. Mm-hmm. But that's a company I don't think about anymore, and I don't work there. And like the VidArmy problems, they're not problems anymore because I don't work there. I like what Tim Allen says on one of the Santa Claus movies. He says, a problem at work is a problem, but a problem at home is a problem. And I just this last week, I faced a really big problem where it was of my own doing. I was a really big idiot and made some pretty crazy mistakes with some interpersonal skills with somebody that I really care about. And the only thing that got me through was, despite the temptation to say my problem's at work, so let's dive into work, fighting the temptation to do that and saying my problem's at work, I'm going to dive in head deep into home. And I'm going to take my girls out on a daddy-daughter date. I'm going to take them to the indoor play gym. I'm going to enjoy reading a book with them. Because everything in you says, go solve the problem at work. Right. But man, my 3-year-old healed my soul this last week because all the failures in life and the reputations I've destroyed through being just a jerk or making mistakes and failures and not acting correctly and learning, my 3-year-old looks at me and I'm her entire world. My wife, when I came to my wife and I said, hey, I think it's time for me to leave VidArmy and I've got this opportunity. I think this is the time for me to just walk away. She said, I don't care what you do. I just want my husband back. And it took a lot of months and a lot of time. And like I said, thankfully Kizik was there to catch my fall and Alex MacArthur, but, I wasn't there anymore.
It's so easy now, right? In hindsight, to say those problems weren't as big. Even as you describe them today, I'm sure you still feel some of that pain, but with perspective, they're like, hey, it was a small video business. You just said
Right.
it. But it was your whole world. It was your whole identity. Your mental health was hinging on what was happening in this negotiation and the success or failure of the company. In the moment, how do we do that? How do we keep perspective in the moment? Because that's what I struggle with too. And curiously, the reason I got a little bit emotional is because my wife said that same thing to me, right? She's like, this is not Joe Grover. She's like, this is not worth it. She's like, I don't care what you do. Like, I'd rather be poor for the rest of our life than for you to be in pain and disconnected and unavailable. And probably the thing that saved me during those years was like some ski trips with my kids. Those were moments where I wasn't thinking about work on Saturdays. Yeah. Driving up I-70 to Vail and Breckenridge when I was living in Colorado. Those are probably that kept me sane through that. And then Sunday night would come and I would spiral and I'd work and fight and claw my way trying to solve all the problems. And but how do we keep the perspective in the moment when these just seem like mountains that are unclimbable?
I feel like you'll understand what I mean when I say, I think unfortunately, one of the best ways to learn how to do it is to go through it and lose a business. I'm so grateful now in 2025 that I lost myself in 2021. Because now I can look back and say nothing's worth that. Really feels like that one analogy of God's holding a teddy bear behind his back that's huge, and you're sitting there crying over this little tiny teddy bear that his eyeballs popped out, and you're sad, and he's like, I've got something so much bigger and better for you, but right now I get that this sucks. Yeah. And so I don't know if, because people talk about shifting perspective, and hopefully listening to this podcast will help people shift perspective. But at the end of the day, I think it's the best learning experiences are the real scars that failure leaves. The actual experience of losing something, failing, egg on your face, the feeling of the yolk dripping down of failure.
That everyone can see and everyone's judging you, right? The failed founder, right? The founder of VidArmy.
Yeah.
Who didn't figure it out, right? I can remember just thinking, oh, I'll never ever be a CEO or a CMO ever again, because like, who would bet on me?
100%. And it's just, unfortunately, time is the one thing.
Yeah.
And it sucks because you want to fix things then, but time has been the single healer of suicidal ideation, damage to a reputation for someone who cares way too much about what people think, not being qualified to do the things that I have committed to doing, the feelings of bitterness and self-doubt and self-loathing. It's time.
Yeah, it took me 7 years to start a podcast to talk about failure. You're far ahead of where I was, this was 4 years ago.
4 years, yeah.
Yeah. Seems like a lifetime ago, doesn't it now?
But also, when you think of 2020, don't you think like, oh, it was like what, last year, 2 years ago? And then people are like, no, it was 5 years ago. And you add on top of that, I mean, 2020 was a crazy year for the entire world, let alone trying to keep a a business that's on the verge of collapsing.
Tell me about you tell your wife that you're done with VidArmy.
Yeah. And
she says, whatever, I don't care at all about that business.
Yeah.
I just care about my husband. How did you feel the day after?
You probably would relate to this too, but you almost kind of go through every grieving process. Like you go through denial and acceptance and bargaining. Yeah. I remember when the contract was signed and I didn't have any equity anymore in it, and I washed my hands of it and had indemnification from whatever happened beyond that point. Muscles I didn't even know I had started to relax. Muscles I didn't know that I'd been clenching for weeks started to relax. And then it was facing the next conundrum, which was, who the crap am I? And what do I do now? And what's my purpose? And what do I go back to school? Can I find a job? Am I hireable? But yeah, I do remember just the feeling washing over me. My wife is just so patient. Sounds like your wife and my wife would really get along, where she's just like, I don't care. We'll make it work. Yeah. We put so much pressure on ourselves in America, but then Utah too.
Yeah. We have these ideals, this idealistic view of what life should be. And it's unhealthy.
It's unhealthy. It drives a lot of unhealthy behaviors.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
That moment. So there's a little bit of grieving. I understand that. There's absolutely, like, I remember throwing away all the t-shirts that had the logo of the company because I couldn't go in my closet. I had all of this swag, hats, t-shirts, bags. I threw it all away because it was a reminder to me of a failure. And I had to distance myself from that. Isn't that, I mean, that's crazy. Like it all went to the Salvation Army. But I do remember also the relief. I also remember after we had laid off a bunch of employees, it was a little bit of a different outcome. And I talked to all the investors. It was super painful. I've talked about it a lot through season 1. I do remember feeling like I was free again. Like it wasn't my identity anymore. It was a bad outcome. I didn't want to talk about it. I wrote about it. I didn't want to talk about it with anyone. I didn't want to unpack it at the time, but I did feel a great relief. And the reason I bring it up is because I just want to say it's okay to quit.
Yeah.
I think, and we've talked a lot about quitting and failing, and are those the same or they're not the same? But I've just changed my philosophy over the last several months as I've talked to entrepreneurs, and it's just not worth it. The reality is, if it's that bad that you don't feel like you should be living anymore, or if it's that bad that you don't think you're going to be able to turn this thing around, then you are more important to your family and to society and to our community than that business is, period, full stop. And this sunk cost fallacy where I've been at it for 3 years, I put all my money and time and energy into it, it's my identity. Stop it. Just stop it. Say I'm done and you move on. Because I've now watched entrepreneur after entrepreneur, whether they were forced to do it right? Because the business just ran out of cash and they had to close the doors, or they chose to do it because that was in their best interest. I've seen those entrepreneurs take that experience and parlay it into successful companies, but most importantly, happier lives, more fulfilled lives. Just stop. Like, it's not worth it. And this idea that we have to persevere against all odds, that we can't ever quit, I think does more damage to humans and to families than all of the wealth that you could accumulate from any exit or IPO that you could ever imagine. So
100%.
I don't know if that's a hot take or not, but like, if you're an entrepreneur and you're like, I don't feel like I have joy in my life, I can't connect with people that I love, right? I don't think I'm going to be able to figure this out. I don't feel like I should be on the earth anymore. Then what I would tell you to do is stop, quit, back away, distance yourself, and you will find some freedom. And honestly, you'll probably find that this endeavor, this venture is not your end game, that you got something else, a bigger teddy bear.
Man, I love that. One of the learnings is I'll be happy when yourself into the grave.
I know.
I'll be happy when this business hits this revenue mark. I'll be happy when we have this many employees. I'll be happy once we get our Series A funding. I'll be happy when. When in reality, if I was to start another business, I would need to make sure I'm happy and that the business could be an amplifier of the happiness, not the giver of it.
Yeah. I love that. Stop it. I'll be happy when. You'll be asking yourself that question until you're 90 years old.
100%.
It has to be independent of the success or any outcome of any company. So I don't know. Do you disagree or agree with what I said? Because I've never said it out loud until I've been sitting here with you and it's been something I wanted to get off my chest. And this is probably the final episode of season 1. So I guess I just want to give permission to entrepreneurs everywhere to stop and to quit and to live to fight another day.
Yeah. Or even slow down.
Yeah.
Who said that you have to have a divvy exit in 3 years?
Yeah.
Like, so many people need to learn to be easily pleased but never satisfied.
Yeah.
Where it's, oh wow, okay, we're not so and so that I saw on LinkedIn, but like, man, I got like, look how far we've come. This is pretty awesome. Like,
totally.
We have a business doing such and such revenue and it's paying our bills and like, oh yeah, we can fix a couple problems. Like, I think shifting the perspective and comparison, it really is the thief of joy. Mm-hmm. And failure, when you're a failure and then you see other people succeeding or even perceiving that they're succeeding, because like I said, I was really good at showing people I was succeeding when we weren't. We're marketers. Of course we're going to show people we succeed. Just because other people are having certain successes doesn't mean that it's your journey. Like, that was my journey that I needed to go through. Yeah. I like what one VC told me this. I love, before you start a business, before you join a business, before you do anything, know thyself. We sit there and compare all these successes of people, and it's like, I don't know what they've got to get to that success or what they've been through to get to that. But at the end of the day, all I get to take with me is the learning from the failures and none of the IPOs. Yeah. And can we just normalize, Can we just normalize in Utah? Quit putting off salary for equity, quit putting off happiness for these little startups in hopes for an IPO. Every entrepreneur is out there selling this dream of like, burn yourself out for me and one day you'll get $2 million or $10 million and you'll have this huge exit. It's like, normalize just getting paid what you need to get paid now.
Yes.
Clocking out at 5, going home and seeing your family, and quit putting off your happiness for this fictitious IPO that's going to happen.
All the VCs in the community are going to be like, Joe had just told all the entrepreneurs to stop and quit their job as the founder. And you've just said, go home at 5 and stop taking equity instead of salary. Take all the salary now. And I agree. Like, how many times?
Flip the script.
I mean, I was sitting with 3 executives one year and we were growing. We were actually had raised a bunch of money and we were doing pretty well. Like, we were on a nice trajectory, but we were not profitable. And I remember there was this conversation about our salaries and we were all under market and we all got paid the exact same amount. which is really interesting. The C-suite all had the exact same salary. We had the exact same bonus. So we're all on parity. And I remember we said, okay, we're going to bump it by $20,000 a year. And I said no. And I was like, guys, and I came from the investment side. I said, listen, we're not profitable. We can't justify that. This is not the right time to give ourselves a raise. We need to get to profitability first. And I know that sounds really benevolent, but it was stupid. Because like that $20,000 was not going to make a difference at all in our burn rate. It was a principle-based decision that I felt strongly about, and I'm sure my investors thank me for it. But guess what? That $20,000 did make a lot of difference to my family and probably to my kids' college fund that, you know, I over the course of 5 years, right, I had $100,000 less in my kids' college funds, in my savings account because I had taken one for the team because I had equity. Because I was looking out for the long game.
I'll be happy when we get this pay. Like, I'm cutting 20,000 now for 20 million in 3 years, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I like that you bring that up.
Yeah,
these are.
It's a lot of what's driving, I think, mental health problems for people in software companies right now, and people working off VC money. Is it's like we got to grind and we got to get, like, we have to double every year, or we're not in top percentile. And look, I'm all about working really hard towards those things. Manny, my CEO, don't worry, I'm still going to work really hard. But also, like, I'm done putting off my happiness, hoping that it happens, because it actually happens maybe 1 out of every 100.
Yeah, even companies that have been successful in Silicon Slopes, and you know who they are, have had massive outcomes. You look at how deep those dollars went, and in some of those companies, it did not go very deep. Yeah. And there was a lot of people that signed up for those gigs with this equity lottery ticket. And those lottery tickets sometimes become a vacation, not a retirement. Yeah. And I've seen that play out a lot. So even if the company does work out, oftentimes, unless you're there early, right, you're probably not going to retire on that outcome.
Yeah.
And so that's a little bit of straight talk from a couple of guys who probably are really rich with a lot of equity that's worth nothing.
100%.
At least I am. Maybe you're not.
I am absolutely filthy rich on failures and unkept promises and outcomes that never happened.
Yeah, it's one day I remember I had an employee say, tell me what this really means, these employee stock options. What's this strike price? What's the company worth? And I remember talking with my executive team, and I said, let's do a training on this so that everyone understands exactly how it works. What's the value of their options today based on the last round? Like, you know, with dilution and preferences, what does it look like if we sell the business for 100 million or $1 billion? And the sad reality was when you looked at 300 or 400 employees and everyone had options and you did the math, these were $50,000 checks. And $50,000 is a lot of money. Right. But I think some of those employees were operating with the assumption that it was 500,000. Just because they didn't
or even
know.
I'm going to retire off this,
or $5 million,
pay off my house,
And so I like the call out. So in closing, Levi, this is one of my favorite conversations of all time. You've shared a bunch of personal things, and some of these things you've shared on LinkedIn as well. And I think it's inspired thousands, maybe tens of thousands of entrepreneurs. Share some parting wisdom for the founder, for the operator who is embattled, right? Who is in a partnership conflict, who is struggling to keep a business afloat, to survive, or who is struggling with deeper kind of mental health challenges. What would you tell that entrepreneur?
Even though every fiber of your being is saying that you can't afford to take the time off, that you can't afford to lose the client, that you can't afford to take the next VC meeting or whatever it is that you're putting off that week off for, actually you can't afford to not take the time off. You need to give yourself permission to lose a client. You need to give yourself permission to piss off an employee. You need to give yourself permission to quit caring so much about the outcome of the business and take a break and force yourself to forget about the business for a day, a week, as long as you can. Because the business is eating you alive and you don't even know it.
So maybe you don't have to quit, but you definitely need a week off.
Or just quit.
Yeah.
Or quit freaking hanging on and just let it go.
Let it go.
Give up. Because you're not giving up. You're actually, what's funny is giving up the business in a lot of regards, and probably in a lot of people's cases, is actually the triumph where you go and save your life.
It's not the failure.
It's not the failure.
That's the reality, is the fact that you're sitting here right now. That's a triumph.
Yeah.
Fact that you lived to fight another day, but also have now parlayed that experience into so many other contributions in our community and in the startup ecosystem here in Utah. There's no failure in that story.
Yeah.
In my opinion. Thank you so much, Levi.
Thank you. I am Levi Lindsay, the former co-founder of VidArmy, an epic failure out of Utah, but turned out to be one of the biggest blessings and lessons in my life, where I got to learn the importance of family and taking care of my own mental health above all else.
Thanks for tuning in to The Real F Word. The real F word is failure. And remember that failure is a stepping stone. It's not just a stumbling block. Join us next time as we continue to explore the journey of resilience and growth without ignoring the true cost, personally, professionally, and financially, that comes with failure. Keep learning, keep growing, and keep embracing the real stories of entrepreneurship. See you next time.